so good morning. Our topic for today is course unit 13 and 14. Actually, this week, course unit 15 na tayo or parang week 15 na. But because we do not have the chance to discuss course unit 13 and 14, so I decided to combine the course unit 13 and 14 today, and then next week I will combine the course unit 15 and 16. Okay, for today, mas sa tingin ko, uunahin ko muna ang course unit 14 kesa sa course unit 13. Kasi konti lang yung discussion ng 14 and then madami yung 13. So, unahin ko tong 14 and also, kasi principles muna siya ng Philippine criminal law. So, before we start, do you have any questions?
None, ma'am.
Okay, if wala, then better you listen today kasi after this discussion is meron kayong quiz. Nakita niyo yung ano nyo? Nakita niyo sa mismo in read this for today's instruction.
Opo, ma'am.
So, let's start. So,
Yes.
the governing principles of Philippine criminal law. So, the topics for this first unit, we have the characteristics of criminal law, the sources, and the principles. So, criminal law. When we say criminal law, ano bang ibig sabihin niya? So, criminal law is that branch or division of law which defines crimes, treats of their nature, and provides for their punishment. Ma'am, sabi niya dyan is the branch or division of law. Ibig sabihin po ba, madami tayong laws? Yes, madami tayong law at isa lang ang branch ng criminal law. Okay? Meron kasi tayong civil law, 'di ba? Meron tayong mercantile law, we have taxations law. So, iba. So, iba ang criminal law sa mga different laws na yan. So, yung mga crime, yung tinatawag nating crime, under yan ng criminal law. Yung mga ibang nalalaman natin na kaso, under yan ng ibang law. So, this is the branch of crimes or yung branch of criminal law. Parang sa subject natin, kanwari, meron tayong law enforcement and layad, ganyan. Pero madami silang different subject. Parang kanwari, department ng English, pero kung meron kang English 1, English 2, English 2. Ito, sa mga law naman, another part or branch lang po ang criminal law. Always remember that. Okay? Again, criminal law is just only a branch or division of law which defines crimes. Okay? It defines crimes, treats of their nature, and provides for their punishment. Ang criminal law, ang ibibigay niya sa atin is, ano ba ang ibig sabihin ng crime? Or parang, paano? What are the elements? Okay? What are the elements or what are the acts that will constitute a crime? And then, treats of their nature. Okay? Paano? Ginawa? Ganyan. Or ano ba ang ibibigay natin sa kanila? Also, what is their punishment? Ano ang ibibigay na punishment sa inyo if nagawa mo yung isang bagay mo? So, that is criminal law. So, development of criminal law in the Philippines. So, paano ba tayo nagkaroon ng revised penal code? Paano ba tayo nagkaroon ng special penal laws? So, we all started in the Code of Kalantiao. Okay, if you will be asked about the development of criminal law in the Philippines, do not start with the revised penal code. Because under the Code of Kalantiao, there were penal provisions. So, under this code, if a man would have a relation with a married woman, she is penalized. So, bago pa tayo magkaroon ng RPC, meron mo tayong mga Code of Kalantiao, Maragtas Code, ayan. So, under this Code of Kalantiao, isa na lang yung tinakel natin. Under this code, if a man would have a relation with a married woman, she is penalized. So, yung for example, sabihin natin si James Patrick, pumatok siya kay Jenna Jane Tamayo, tapos si Jenna Jane Tamayo ay may asawa na, therefore, makukulong si Jenna Jane Tamayo. Adultery is a crime during those days. Even offending religious things. For example, di ba, noong unang panahon, iba-iba tayo ng religions. May naniniwala sa mga anito, may naniniwala sa mga spirito lang. So, yung mga naggumagawa ng mga offenses or parang gumagawa sila ng parang disrespectful with those religious things, talagang pinaparusahan na. So, just such gods are penalized. Sabi niya. The Code of Kalantiao has certain penal provisions. So, the Filipino have their own set of penology also. Then, after ng Code Kalantiao, Code of Maragtas, yan, nagkaroon din tayo tinatawag nating Spanish Código Penal. Because we are being conquered by the Spaniards. So, yan. Sinundan natin yung batas nila. So, Spanish Código Penal. So, when the Spanish colonizers came, the Spanish Spanish Código Penal was made applicable and extended to the Philippines by the Royal Decree of 1870. So, yung mismong Spanish Código Penal na pinapatupad or ini-implement sa Spain, since nasakop tayo or we are being conquered by the Spanish government, ang nangyari, kung anong pinapatupad nilang batas doon, pinapatupad din po nila dito sa Philippines. So, yun yung Spanish Código Penal or yung parang revised penal code sa kanila. And then, nagawa yun through the extended act of the Royal Decree of 1817. This was made effective in the Philippines by July 14, 1876. So, who is Rafael del Pan? Sino ba si Rafael del Pan? So, he drafted a correctional code, which was after the Spanish Código Penal and it was extended to the Philippines. But that correctional code was never enacted into law. Hindi siya gumawa lang siya pero hindi siya pinatupad. So, instead, a committee was organized and headed by Anacleto Diaz. So, this committee was the one who drafted the present revised penal code. So, yung revised penal code, okay, ang pinaka-author niyan is si Anacleto Diaz. Tatlo sila hindi ko na lang sinama. So, kasi pag-aaralan, meron din kayong, meron kayong subjects na criminal law. So, bakit po siya nadidiscuss today, ma'am, yung criminal law? Kasi nga, ang subject natin is Introduction to Criminology. As you can see, ang dami nating natakal, may theories, may ganito. Lahat ng introductions. Kasi, para meron kayong, tawag ito, nakikita nyo na yung mga subjects na pwede nyo itackle sa susunod. So, meron kayong idea. So, the present revised penal code. So, when a committee to draft revised penal code was formed. So, one of the reference that they took hold was the correctional code of Del Pan. So, ginamit lang nilang reference yung ginawang correctional code ni Rafael Del Pan in order for them to come up with this revised penal code. So, in fact, many provisions of revised penal code were no longer from the Spanish penal code. Revised penal code was originally, ito yung gawa ng Pinoy talaga, headed by Anacleto Diaz. So, dati, di ba, ang ginagamit lang nating code dito sa Philippines is the Spanish legal code or yung by the Royal Decree. Pero ngayon, gumawa tayo ng bago. And it was authored by Anacleto Diaz and two more personalities. And this revised penal code was based from the correctional code made by Rafael Del Pan. So at this time, okay, revised penal code was no longer from the Spanish penal code. They were lifted from the correctional code of Del Pan. So it was him, di ba, who formulated or paraphrased this provision making into a simpler and more understandable to Filipinos because at that time, there were only a handful who understood Spanish. Di ba nga, ang sinusundan kasi nating batas is yung Spanish, yun nga, legal code or Spanish Código Penal. So, ang nangyari doon ay, ang nakasulat doon is words na Spanish. Spanish talaga siya. So, hindi natin sila maintindihan. So, dahil konti lang yung mga Pilipino na nakakaintindi ng Spanish. Tanong, ilang years ba tayong sinakop ng ng Spaniards, yung mga Spanish people? Ilang years? May kausap pa ba ako? How many years?
Ma'am, yung po ba yung 333 years?
Yes. So, isipin nyo, 333 years. So, malamang sa malamang yung mga ninuno talaga natin may halong Espanyol. So, ang nangyari dito, since nga sinakop tayo ng mga Spaniards nun, yung kung ano yung batas nila, ito na yung pinapatupad sa atin. Nung gumawa na tayo ng sarili, nung lumaya na tayo yung revised penal code. Okay? So, bakit ma'am? Bakit nila kailangan gumawa ng sariling batas? Siyempre, kailangan gumawa tayo ng sariling batas dahil kung ganon, kung Spanish pa din, parang halatado naman na alin. Talagang sinasakop tayo ng Spanish. So, ano ba yung characteristics of criminal law? So, these are the characteristics. May tatlong characteristics ang criminal law. General, territorial, and prospective. Again, we have three characteristics of criminal law: general, territorial, and prospective. What is the difference? Okay, general. Because criminal law is binding on all persons who reside or sojourn in the Philippine territory. When we say general, it means applicable po siya sa lahat ng tao na nakatira dito sa Philippines. Whether foreigner ka man, okay? Whether pinangaral sa ibang bansa pero naninirahan ka dito. Again, it only means when we say general, it means criminal law is applicable with no exemptions. Or meron namang exemptions na yung mga certain personality, pero ibig sabihin, ang gusto kong ipahayag sa inyo na general, it means lahat ng taong nakatira sa Pilipinas. So for example, hindi porket anak ka ng presidente, tapos pumatay ka ng isang tao, hindi ka makukulong. Okay? Ganun ang ibig sabihin ng general. Okay? General, it means binding on all persons. We're talking about the persons who live in the Philippines. That is the meaning of general. How about territorial, ma'am? What is territorial? From the word spelled territory. We're talking about the place. Because criminal law undertakes to punish crimes committed within the Philippines or within the Philippine territory. For example, gumawa ka ng crime dito sa Pilipinas or parang kahit anong foreigner ka, pumunta ka ng Pinas, tapos nagnakaw ka, saan ka mapaparusahan? Sa Pilipinas or saan ka malilitis? Sa Pilipinas o sa ibang bansa? Malamang dito sa Philippines. Kasi saan mo ginawa yun? Sa Pilipinas. So, ganun ang ibig sabihin ng territorial. We're talking about the place. Ibig sabihin, kung ano man ang crime na ginawa mo, basta sa Pilipinas mo siya ginawa, still, malilitis ka, mapaparusahan ka sa Philippines. Pero na lang sa mga ibang cases. Merong mga ibang cases na nalitis lang dito and then ililipat sila sa ibang bansa. Lalo na kung meron naman silang diplomatic relationship. Yung bansa natin doon sa another country na yun. Again, general, we're talking about the people. Territorial, we're talking about within the whole territory of the Philippines. And the last one, prospective. What is the meaning of prospective? Anyone? Sige nga, meron po ba na makakapagsabi? What is the meaning of prospective? So, prospective is that penal law cannot make an act punishable when committed. Crimes are punished under the laws in force at that time of their commission. Ibig sabihin ng prospective, wala tayong retroactive effect. For example, yung kanwari, si Lawrence Ani Bacani. Hi, Lawrence. How are you?
Hi, ma'am. Okay lang po.
Okay. For example, si Lawrence. Si Lawrence ay isang mamamatay langgam. Hate na hate niya yung mga langgam. Okay? Kasi pag kinakagat siya ng langgam, agad nagpapantal siya. So, ang ginawa ni Lawrence Bacani, lahat ng makita niyang langgam, talagang pinuputol niya yung ulo ng mga langgam. Bawat makita niyang langgam, basta hindi siya kinakagat, pinuputol niya yung ulo. So, isa siyang mamumugot ulo ng langgam. Murderer siya ng mga langgam. Itong si Luigi Castro, it so happened, inaalagaan naman pala niya yung mga langgam. Okay? Insect lover kasi itong si Luigi Castro. At ang kanyang napiling insect na mahalin ay ang mga langgam. For example, one day, okay, si Luigi Castro kasi senator. Tignan natin. Napakagandang senator, ang kanyang mga inaalagaan ay mga langgam. Nakita niya si Lawrence Ani Bacani, sabi niya. Nakita niya or nahuli niya na nabumugot siya ng ulo ng langgam. Kasi nga murderer yan Murderer ng mga langgam Okay? So, ang ginawa ni Luigi Castro, ganito. Pakukulong kita. Sabi niya ganyan. Sumagot itong si Lawrence. Bakit mo naman ako pakukulong? Kasi, sumagot ito si Luigi, kasi mamumugot ka ng ulo ng langgam. Ang sabi naman ni Lawrence, wala namang batas. Wala namang batas na nagsasabi na, alin? Ang pumugot ng ulo ng langgam. Diba? Kasi, we all believe na there is no crime when there is no law punishing it. Diba? Hindi naman pwedeng parusahan ang mga bagay na wala namang batas na nagsabing dapat parusahan siya kung walang rules. So, anong ginawa ni Luigi Castro? Dahil senator siya, gumawa siya ng batas niyan. Okay? Gumawa siya ng batas na alin? Na ipakukulong ng habang buhay yung mga mamumugot ng ulo ng langgam. Ang tanong, pwede ba niyang ipakulong si Lawrence? Diba sinabi niya, pakulong kita. O, darating si Luigi kaso, sasampalan niya ng kaso sa Lores. Ang tanong, pwede niyang pakulungan? Ipakulong?
Po, hindi po.
Hindi. How about the others? Pwede niya ipakulong?
Hindi po.
Bakit?
Hindi po.
Bakit?
Hindi pa po siya batas.
Kasi nung ginawa ni Lawrence yun, okay? Kasi nung ginawa ni Lawrence yun or nakita niya siya ni Luigi kaso, wala pang batas na nagsasabing bawal yun. Pero kung kanwari si Lawrence, ayan, meron ng batas. Tapos nakita niya ulit, langon, lagi kang napupunta kay Ant Lover, nakita niya ulit pinugutan ng ulo ang langgam. Tanong, pwede na ba niyang sampahan ng kaso si Lawrence?
Pwede na po. Yes po.
Pwede na, diba? Yun ang meaning ng prospective.
Pwede na po.
Okay, that's the meaning of prospective. There is no crime when there is no law punishing it. So, for example, ngayon, pinaparusahan yung mag-post sa FB, ganyan-ganyan. For example lang naman. Therefore, hindi pwedeng sampahan yung kaso yung mga nakapag-post na sa FB dati. Kasi at that time, wala pa ng bang batas na bawal mag-post sa FB. As simple as that. So, do you understand now the meaning of prospective?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So, general, territorial, and prospective, these are the three characteristics of criminal law. Again, I will just repeat. When we say general, we're talking about the people who lives in the country. So, kung sino man ang tumira dito sa Pilipinas, tapos gumawa siya ng crime, therefore, applicable sa kanya ang law. Territorial, ibig sabihin, basta committed siya within the Philippine. Okay? Pati yung plus mo na yung 12 nautical miles, diba? Within the territorial waters of the Philippines. And the last one is prospective. Ibig sabihin, ang ating criminal law, we're talking about na hindi tayo retroactive effect or parang there is no law, there is no crime when there is no law punishing it. So, generality. Yun na yan eh. Diniscuss ko lang siya. Kasi ang haba eh. So, ginawa ko ganyan lang. So, you can read this PowerPoint. Ito na lang. Sige, exemptions lang, 'di ba? Sabi niya. Generality of criminal law means criminal of the country governs all person within the country regardless of their race, belief, sex, or creed. So, however, it is subject to exceptions. Meron tayong mga exceptions brought about by the international agreement. Yung mga sinasabi nga sa inyo, merong mga diplomatic relations or yung mga international agreement nila. Ambassador, chief of states, okay? And other diplomatic officials are immune. Ibig sabihin, meron silang immunity. Hindi sila pwedeng sampahan ng kaso dito sa Pilipinas from the application of penal laws when they are in the country where they are assigned. Ibig sabihin, kung ganun man, hindi sila lilitisan sa Pilipinas, pero ipapadala sila sa ibang bansa or ibabalik sila dun sa bansang pinanggalingan nila at dun sila malilitis. Note that consuls are not diplomatic officers. This includes consul general, vice consul, or any consul of foreign country, who are therefore not immune to the operation or application of penal law. So, consuls are subject to the penal laws of the country where they are assigned. So, it has no reference to territory. Wherever you were asked to explain this, it does not include territory. It refers to the person. Again, when we say general or generality, we're talking about the person. Next, territoriality again. Basta dito lang siya sa pinaka anong sulok ng Pilipinas. Basta ginawa mo yung crime, kahit sabihin mo nang nasa sulok kayo or nasa boundary na po kami ng international water ng Malaysia at Philippines, ma'am. Sana ko masasampa ng kaso. Kung still, counted pa rin yung place mo sa Philippines, therefore, sa Philippines pa rin yan. So, meron kasi tayo tinatawag na terrestrial jurisdiction, fluvial, and aerial. When we say terrestrial jurisdiction, we're talking about the land. Exercise over land. When we say fluvial jurisdiction, we're talking about the maritime or interior waters. For example, yung mga sa dagat na. Ayan. So, counted pa rin kasi as the Philippines yan. And then, we have also the aerial jurisdiction. It is the jurisdiction exercised over the atmosphere. For example, nasa airplane sila. Yan o. Ma'am, yung sasakyan na airplane Philippine Airlines, kaso galing siya ng Amerika. Yan. So, minsan, kapag ang ginagamit nating plane, okay, meron kasi yan malalaman nyo din sa mga kriminal, bigyan ko na lang yung pahapyaw. So, kanwari, Philippine, naman siya, Philippine vessel, ayan, Philippine airplane, ganyan, Philippine planes. Still, na-extend ng ating territorial jurisdiction. Okay? Ginamit kasi pang Pilipinas. Basta unang Pilipinas, still sa Pilipinas siya. Magkakaroon ng kaso or parang magkakaroon ng jurisdiction. When we say jurisdiction kasi, ito yung authority and power mo to hear, okay, and to judge or to critique a crime. Ibig sabihin, may karapatan ka pag sinabing jurisdiction. Ibig sabihin, may karapatan ng Pilipinas na litisin ng isang crime na yon. Next, the prospectivity or what we call the irretrospectivity. Ganun lang yun yung sinabi ko sa inyo. Na yung there is no crime when there is no law punishing it. Though, meron tayong tinatawag na exception. Okay? Ito. In some textbooks, an exemption is exercised to the penal law if favorable to offender, in which case it would have retroactive application. Kailan tayo nagkakaroon ng retroactive application? For example, tuloy natin yung kwento ng langgam. Okay? So, nahuli ulit nakita, dahil meron ng batas na mamamugot ulo, okay, ng langgam si Lawrence Anibacani. So, napakulong siya ni Luigi Castro. Okay? Napakulong siya ni Luigi Castro. Ngayon, si Lawrence ngayon, yun na. Pinakulong na nga. Darating ngayon si Marilyn Pangan. Okay? Dumating si Marilyn Pangan, senator din. Nakita niya si Lawrence Anibacani na nakakulong. Panghabang buhay na kulong. Tapos, binasa ni Marilyn Pangan yung law na ginawa ni Luigi Castro na napatupad or napa-implement. So, nakita ni Marilyn Pangan, napaka-harsh naman. Diba? Napaka-harsh naman ng penalty niya or punishment niya, panghabang buhay na kulong. So, ang ginawa ni Marilyn Pangan, ni-revise niya, rinipil niya yung batas na ginawa ni Luigi Castro. Binabaan niya yung penalty from panghabang buhay na kulong, ginawa na lang niyang maximum of 20 years. Ang tanong, ibig sabihin nun, lahat ng pupugot ng ulo ng langgam, ngayon, okay, 20 years na lang ang kulong. Ang tanong, applicable ba yung kay Lawrence? Yung bagong batas na ginawa ni Marilyn Pangan?
Hindi po.
Hindi po.
Hindi siya kung tutusin, di ba? Hindi siya, di ba? Pero, dito sa batas or sa ating tinatawag na prospectivity, there is an exemption. Kapag yung bagong batas or yung nakarepil na batas is favorable to the offender or to the accused, pwede po. In which in case, it would have a retroactive application. So, pwede. Basta, okay, applicable or favorable siya kay Lawrence. So, kahit na nakulong na si Lawrence dahil pumatay siya ng langgam, still, kung favorable na siya, for example, nakakaserve na si Lawrence ng 10 years, ibig sabihin, tas na-repeal ang batas na penalty, pwede. Pwedeng maging another 10 years na lang ang gugugulin ni Lawrence sa loob ng kulungan. Doon lang tayo nagkakaroon ng retroactive application. Always remember, if the punishment or if the new law is favorable to the accused. Okay. Provided, kaso may exemptions to the exemptions. Alin? Provided that the offender is not a habitual delinquent and there is no provision in the law against its retroactive application. So, provided, number 1, if hindi daw habitual delinquent. What is the meaning of habitual delinquent? When say habitual delinquent, yung paulit-ulit siyang nasampahan ng kaso, pabalik-balik siya sa kulungan. Ayan. Provided na hindi siya ganon, therefore, pwede po. Okay? Pwede siyang i-apply yung retroactive ng isang law. Another, kung yung mismong law na sinasabi niya, for example, nirepil nga ni Marilyn Pangan, yung ganon, na 20 years lang. Tapos nilagay naman niya na there's law is no retroactive in application. Therefore, si Lawrence Anibacani is hindi pwedeng, magkaroon ng effect sa kanya yung batas na yon. Kasi in-state dun sa batas na ginawa ni Marilyn Pangan na there is no retroactive application. Naiintindihan po ba niyan? Hi. Batas kasi ito pinag-uusapan natin eh, kaya talagang dapat madiscuss ng madiscuss. So, naiintindihan po ba yon?
Opo.
Ganun lang naman siya.
Ma'am.
So, what are the sources of criminal law? So, we have revised penal code. Ayan nga, ano nga tawag ulit kapag revised penal code? Anong tawag sa kanila?
Felonies.
Felony.
Kapag special penal laws,
Offense.
okay, can you give me example of
Offense.
special penal laws? Ha? Can you give me examples of special penal laws? Ano yung mga special penal laws na yan, ma'am? Baka first year college pa rin kayo, crime pa man din kayo, hindi nyo alam. Kapag narinig nyo yung special penal laws, ano yung example nun? Yung mga RA. Kapag nakita yung batas na RA, RA 1101, ganyan, RA, ganyan, ang tawag doon ay special penal laws. Okay. Pero kapag naman, ang sinabi niya, revised penal code na ang violation niya, Article 248. Ayan, Article 248 of revised penal code, he committed a murder. Ibig sabihin, that is a felony. Kapag ang batas ay articles na under ng RPC, felony. Kapag naman example ng mga special laws, yun yung mga RA. Always remember that kasi ayokong maging syunga kayo. Meron po tayong mga estudyante kasi na kahit 4th year na, hindi pa rin alam ang pinagkaiba ng RPC sa special law. Okay, ayoko. Dahil first year pa lang tinuturo na yan, ayoko na pati kayo, ganun ang mangyari, ha? So, again, kapag sinabi nating mga, tawag dito, RAs, ito yung mga special laws. Kapag yung mga Article 248, Article of ganito ganyan, that is revised penal code. Executive orders, yung mga EO 292, hindi po eye optical yung EO ha. EO, okay, executive orders, mga ganyan. Kapag sinabing executive orders, sinong gumawa niyan? Sinong gumawa ng executive orders? Mga executive.
Sangguniang bayad, pwede po.
Di president. Okay, executive. Pag nakita nyo ang ibig sabihin ng executive order, that is from the Philippine, the president, ganyan. Pwede rin po yung presidential decree, yung kay, Marcos. Ayan, president din yon. And then, pwede rin naman yung mga different groups sa EO. For example, yun nga sa Guning Bayan, pwede rin. Next, we also have administrative orders. For example, meron lang silang pinapatupad na batas sa munisipyo. Ganyan, yung about their administration. Yan, administrative orders. Usually, yung mga administrative orders na to, for the employees of the government. And then, meron din tayo tinatawag na local ordinances. Ito na yung mga locally. For example, di ba may mga rules na pinapatupad sa isang munisipyo, tapos sa isang munisipyo naman hindi. For example, sa Bataan, nakaban, liquor ban sila. Sa pagpunta mo ng Pampanga, hindi naman liquor ban. So, yung mga local ordinances. And other issuance of punitive in nature. So, lahat ng yan ay sources ng criminal law. Diyan po nanggagaling yung mga batas natin. Actually, kung tutusin, sa Philippines, napakadami nating batas. Ano ang problema? At ang gaganda ng mga batas natin. Ano ang problema? Sa tingin nyo, anong problema?
Di po napapatupad ng maayos.
Okay, very good. It was not implemented in its proper nature. Parang wala. Madami lang. They are only good for reading. Sabi ko nga They are only good for reading, but not for its application. At saka isa pa, wala kasing pangil. Ma'am, pangil nangangagat? Okay? Ibig sabihin, parang walang pangil or hindi nakakatakot, hindi natatakot yung mga tao kahit na merong batas. Bakit? Kasi nakikita nila na ay, kahit naman gawin ko to, walang makakahuli sa akin Kulang tayo dun sa application ng enforcement. Yung nanghuhuli, diba? Tapos yung hindi mapaparusahan. Kaya, ang nangyayari, hindi natatakot yung mga Pinoy. Na gagawin nila to kahit na meron pa ding batas na nagsasabing bawal yan. So, again, these are the sources of criminal law. Sa revised penal code, nakahati yan sa Book 1 and Book 2. So, Book 1, ito yung Article 1 to 113, and Book 2, Article 114 to 365. So, limitations on the power of Congress to enact penal laws. Okay? Di ba, sino ba yung gumagawa ng mga special penal laws? Yung mga RA, sinong gumagawa niyan?
Senator.
Senator.
Ano pa?
Congressman.
Congressman. Yan. Yung mga gumagawa natin ng batas is yung mga House of Representatives. So, lahat ba pwedeng gawin nilang batas? So, meron din silang rules kung paano sila gagawa ng batas. Again, must be general in application. Okay? Ibig sabihin ng general application, katulad ng generality. And then, must not partake on the nature of ex post facto law. Anong ibig sabihin ng ex post facto law? Yung parang retroactive. Sabi ko retroactive sa inyo kanina, or perspective, ganyan. And then, meron din tayong tinatawag na must not partake to the nature of a bill of attainder. Okay? Pag sinabi natin bill of attainder, ito yung, ibig sabihin nito, pinaparusahan nila agad yung isang offender ng kahit walang paglilitis. Diba, bawal yon? Kapag nakuha ka ng isang police, dapat suspect ka pa lang. Hindi ka pwedeng ikulong agad-agad. Yung parang, hindi ka pwedeng akusahan agad-agad. So, without evidence. That is bill of attainder. And then, must not impose cruel and unusual punishment or excessive fines. For example, kung pinapatupad natin sa Philippines, wala ng death penalty. Therefore, wala kang ilalagay na death penalty dyan. Kasi, hindi pa naman na-prove or hindi pa nababalik ang death penalty. So, it must not impose cruel and unusual. Ibig sabihin, kakaiba. Kanwari, palakarin siya sa bubog. Ayan. So, or excessive fines. Anong pinagkaiba ng penalty sa fine? Sige nga. Alam niyo ba yung pinagkaiba ng penalty sa fine? Penalty, yun yung parang pagkukulong. Ang fine, ito yung
Pagmulta.
multa. Very good. So, that is course unit 14. Ganun lang siya kaikli. Diba? Sabi sa inyo, may ikli lang. So, punta na tayo ngayon sa course unit 13. Yan. Kita ba? Kita po ba ang course unit 13? Medyo mahaba-haba ang usapan natin ngayon. Kaya ko ginawang 10:45 eh. Kasi medyo mahaba-haba ang usapan natin today. So, Introduction to Criminal Law, course unit 13. Ito yung mga topics niya. Napakadami. And I hope sana matapos natin today. So, the Philippine Criminal Law. Again, sabi ko nga, ito yung itsura ng mga revised penal code, yung mga mukhang Bible. So, the Philippines, like any other sovereign state, has its own code of crime for crime of the behavior control of the people sojourning its territory. So, this code is what we call Act 3815. Okay? The revised penal code was enacted through this law, Act number 3815, which took effect January 1, 1932. So, January 1, 1932. So, this chapter will discuss the historical background of the Philippines, okay, in the criminal law, especially in the revised penal code, theories which revised penal code derive, and definition of felony, circumstances affecting criminal liability, and the fundamental principles of criminal law. So, historical background, katulad nga lang nung sinabi ko kanina. Sige, basahin natin. So, this is the main source of revised penal code, the Spanish Code of 1870. So, prior to effectivity of RPC, the Spanish Penal Code was enforced in the Philippines. This code was extended in the Philippines by the virtue of Royal Order noong December 17, 1886, which took effect on July 14, 1887. So, again, gumawa tayo ng sariling atin, which is the RPC, and it was headed by Justice Anacleto Diaz. So, various penal acts enacted during the early years of American Code, and like the libel, malversation, cobbling, and the others. So, meron kasi characteristics ang ating revised penal code. Meron din siyang classical and positivist. Ano ba ang pinagkaiba ng classical sa positivist? Katulad lang po ng mga theories na yon. Sige nga, if you could remember what is classical? Ano ang focus ng classical?
Free will.
Oh, free will. Ano ang focus ng classical?
Neoclassical.
No. Anong neoclassical? Ano ang focus ng classical? Ano? Saan ang focus ng classical? Sa tao, sa crime, sa punishment?
Tao po. Free will.
Tao po.
Tao.
Ah,
Sa punishment?
Punishment po.
di ba?
Sa punishment
Ang
po.
classical kay Cesar Beccaria, di ba? Kaya nga on crime on its punishment, di ba? Yung kanyang essay. Ano ba yung kay classical, di ba? Man is essentially a moral creature with an absolute free will to choose between good and evil, and therefore more stress is placed upon the result of the felonious act than upon the criminal himself. So, ibig sabihin, kanino ang focus niya? Doon sa mismong penalty. Wala siyang pakialam kung sino ang gagawa nun. Kasi iniisip nga nila, free will nila yon, ginusto nila yon. Therefore, ano ang focus niya? Doon sa mismong punishment. Basis of criminal liability is what? The human free will. So, crime is a juridical entity and penalty is an evil and a means of juridical tutelage. Ibig sabihin, kung mas mataas daw ang punishment nila or kung mas rigid and maganda ang enforcement ng punishment nila, therefore, magkakaroon ng deterrence sa tinatawag nila. Which is magkaiba kay positivist, kay Cesar Lombroso. Kay Cesar Lombroso ba, ano ang kaniyang pinagtutuunan ng pansin? Anong focus?
Treatment.
Treatment.
Scientific
Why?
treatment.
Treatment. Why? Because we considered as the people in here as
Sick
Person.
sick person. Diba? Ibig sabihin, one is a
Sick person.
occasionally by just a strange and morbid phenomenon which conditions him to do wrong in spite of or contrary to his volition. Ibig sabihin, magkaibang magkaiba. Sa classical, sasabihin natin, kaya niya ginawa ang crime na yon kasi ginusto niya. Free will. Sa positivist, anong sinasabi niya? Okay, kaya lang nagawa yun ng isang tao kasi merong something mali siyang pinagdadaanan. It's either may mali sa pagkakatao niya, inborn, di ba? Or it's either there are contributory factors that will affect him to commit a crime. Kita na yung pinagkaiba. Kaya ang positivist, ang focus niya is on the person or on the individual. So, ibig sabihin, they are needing with the treatment. Nakita na yung pinagkaiba niyan ng classical and positivist. So, lahat yan, ang theories ng criminal law, sinusundan naman nila yan sa ating revised penal code. So, what are the parts of revised penal code? We have the principles affecting criminal liability, articles 1 to 20. Then, we have din tayo articles 21 to 113. The penalties including criminal and civil liability, and the specific felonies and their penalties, articles 114 to 366. Ito ang mga specific felonies and their penalties. Nasa book 2. Book 1 and book 2 tayo. Okay? Basta article 1 to article 113, book 1 yan. Wala ka pang makikitang penalty dyan ng mga murder, ganyan, wala pa. Nandito pa lang yung mga parang guidelines kung paano susundan or iintindihin yung ating law. And then, yung itong book 2, specific felonies and their penalties, eto na. Eto na yung mga may murder, ganyan, homicide, robbery, yan. So again, criminal law, it is a branch of public law which defines crimes, diba? Binibigyan definition ng crime, traits of their nature, and, of course, it provides for their punishment. So, basic principle, eto lang. There is no crime when there's no law punishing it. Always remember that. Okay? There is no crime when there's no law punishing it. In other words, any and all must be defined by the law. As a rule, penal laws are prospective in effect. So, penal laws and those of public security and safety shall be obligatory upon all who live or sojourn in the Philippine territory, subject to the principle of international law and to treaty stipulation. So, yung mga basic principles of criminal law, parang ina-apply lang din natin yung ating tatlong characteristics. What are the three characteristics again? Of the generality, ano pa?
Territorial.
Territoriality, and the last one is
Prospectivity.
Prospectivity.
so, ganun lang siya. Always remember, there is no crime and there is no law punishing it. Okay? Huwag niyo pong kakalimutan yun, ha? Kasi yung iba binabaliktad. There is no law when there is no crime. Baliktad po. There is no crime when there is no law. Kung paunahin kayo, ano ang nauna? Crime or law? Ang nauna? Crime or law?
Crime.
Crime.
Ano
Lolo.
nauna? Crime or law? Sige nga.
Law.
Law.
Anong nauna? Law or crime?
Law.
Law.
Bakit yung iba? Crime. Sige nga. Bakit? Defend your answer.
Crime po.
O sige, bakit crime?
Hindi naman po nagagawa ng law. Ay, law. Walang crime.
Di naman sila gagawa ng law kung walang crime. How about the others? Bakit law?
Di naman po magiging crime yung isang bagay, ma'am, kung wala pong law na nagpapanis po sa kanila.
Very good. Okay? Always remember, hindi pwedeng tawaging crime ang isang act unless merong batas. Ayan na nga there is no crime when there is no law punishing it. Hindi mo pwedeng tawagin, for example, yung ginawa ni Lawrence Anibacani na pagputol ng ulo ng mga langgam. Hindi mo pwedeng tawaging crime yon unless meron munang batas. Pwede mo sabihin masamang gawain or parang meron siyang ginagawang masama, pero hindi mo siya pwedeng sabihin crime. Bakit? Wala namang nagsasabi na alin. Crime yung ginagawa niya, di ba? Naiintindihan mo ba? So, mali ang isipin. Pag tinanong kayo, anong nauna? Crime or law? Ano sagot nyo?
Law.
Law.
Law kayo. Kasi nga, always remember, the definition of crime, ibig sabihin, kailangan meron mo ng batas. Naiintindihan? Naiintindihan po ba yan? Basic yan basic.
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
I'm talking with you, this is basic. So, sana, okay, ang parang gusto ko na lang mangyari, kahit na bumagsak kayo sa quiz ko mamaya or sa mga finals nyo, tandaan nyo lang sana hanggang 4th year kayo yung pinag-aaralan natin today about law. Kasi these are just the basic na kailangan yung malaman as a criminology student. Para hindi kayo naglumumukhang kawawa or parang nakakahiya pagdating ng mga higher years. Kasi alam nyo, pag mag-OJT kayo, ganyan, nararanasan or nakikita namin sa mga ibang estudyante, yung mga hindi nakikinig during their discussion. Tatanungin sila, oy, di ba crime ka? Yan. Yung iba makikipag-away pa sa Facebook. Yan, ganyan. Di ba nakakaya tapos criminology, hindi alam ang sagot? Basic, sabi nga nila. Kapag crime yan, ngayon first year kayo, basic. Okay? So, as a rule, meron tayong tinatawag na rule sa ating territorial. Again, di ba meron tayong tatlo? We have terrestrial, meron fluvial, and aerial territory. So, as a rule under RPC shall be enforced not only within the Philippines archipelago, including its atmosphere, its interior waters, and maritime zone, but also outside of its jurisdiction against those who, ayan, kahit na sabihin mo na nasa Amerika kayo, tapos, gumawa ka ng crime doon sa Philippine vessel, you commit an offense while on the Philippine ship or airship, still liable ka pa rin or meron jurisdiction sa'yo ang Pilipinas. Next, should forge or counterfeit any coin or currency known in the Philippine Islands or obligations and securities issued by the government of the Philippine Islands. For example, nasa China ka, tapos pinepeke mo yung mga pera dito sa Pilipinas, still liable ka po sa Pilipinas, hindi sa China. Next, should be liable for acts connected with the introduction into these islands of the obligations and securities mentioned in the preceding number. Ito. While being a public officer or employee, should commit an offense exercise of their function. For example, bigla kang pumunta sa Amerika, kanwari, meron lang kayong general meeting within the other consuls, ganyan. And then, gumawa ka ng crime in relation to your work as a consul, ganyan. Therefore, still liable ka sa Philippines kahit na ginawa mo yan sa Amerika. So these are the exemptions wherein na-extend po yung pagiging territoriality natin. Okay? So should commit any crimes against national security and the laws of nations defined in Title 1 of Book 2 of this code. Exemption, except as provided in treaties and laws of preferential application. So definition of felonies, again, kapag felonies, these are the crimes against
Person.
RPC.
revised penal
Code.
Okay. So these are acts or omissions punishable by law or felonies. Ayan. Felonies are committed or tinatawag nilang delitos. Okay? Delito stands for felonies. So, felonies are committed not only by means of deceit or dolo, but also by means of fault or culpa. So, dalawang uri kasi ang pag-create ng felonies. Pwede yung intentional o tinatawag nating deceit. Pwede rin naman yung mga hindi sinasadya, yung tinatawag nating fault or culpa. So, there is the deceit when the act is performed with deliberate intent. Again, tinatawag nating intent, ibig sabihin, sinasadya. Iba ang sinasadya sa di sinasadya. Okay? Parang sinabi niya, iba ang paubaya sa pinabayaan. Kung paubaya siguro, ito yung tinatawag natin na parang fault or culpa lang. Ganyan. Pag naman pinabayaan, ito na yung talagang deliberate intent or tinatawag nating deceit or dolo. So, there is deceit when the act is performed with deliberate intent. Meron pang loloko kapag intentional. And there is fault or parang hindi sinasadya when the wrongful act, okay, results from the imprudence, negligence, lack of foresight, and lack of skill. Yung mga hindi sinasadya. For example, nagda-drive, accident. Diba? Sinasadya mo ba yun na gawin? Hindi. Nabunggo ka, sinadya mo ba? Hindi. So, pero bakit merong kaso? Kasi nga, ang felonies is pwedeng magawa sa dalawa. Pwedeng intentional, pwede rin pong not unintentional. Yan. So, according to the stages of execution, alam nyo ba to? Bakit merong attempted murder? Merong frustrated, consummated. Itong consummated, hindi nyo talaga to maririnig kasi ibig sabihin, gawan ang crime. Ano bang pinagkaiba ng attempted, frustrated, and consummated? Okay. For example, murder tayo. Murder. For example, murder. So, there is an attempt, okay, when the offender commences the commission of felony directly by overt acts, and, always remember this, does not perform all the acts of execution which should produce the felony by reason of some cause or accident other than his own spontaneous disposition. For example, balik tayo sa mamamatay langgam. Favorite ko talaga yung mamamatay ng langgam eh. O, kanwara si Lawrence Ani Bacani, nakita na niya yung mga langgam. So, hinanap niya, nag-ano pa siya, nag-telescope, ganyan-ganyan. Nung nakita niya yung mga langgam, papatayin na niya sana. Okay? Papatayin na niya sana. Hindi naman niya pupugutan ng ulo ngayon. Ang gagawin niya, lalagyan niya ng muriatic acid. Okay? Kaso, edi yun nandun na siya, no? Binuksan na niya yung muriatic acid. Nalagyan na niya sa labas ng bahay niya. Ganyan. Pagka lalagyan na niya sana ng muriatic acid, itong yung kung saan talaga nakaplace yung mga langgam, biglang nadulas yung kamay ni Lawrence Ani Bacani. Ang nangyari, natapon sa iba yung muriatic acid. Yun ang tinatawag nating attempted. Bakit? Kasi ina-attempt pa lang. Hindi pa niya natapos. He or she does not perform all the acts of execution to commit a crime or to produce a crime. That is attempted. Ano naman yung tinatawag nating frustrated? Okay, sa frustrated ganito. It is frustrated when the offenders performs all the acts of execution. Lahat. Offenders performs all the acts of execution which would produce the felony as a consequence but which nevertheless do not produce it by reason of causes independent of will of the perpetrator. Ang frustrated ganito. Ginawa mo na lahat-lahat. Si Lawrence Ani Bacani, nilagyan niya na ng muriatic acid yung mga langgam. Ang kaso, hindi namamatay ang mga langgam. So, ibig sabihin, that is frustrated. Nakita yung pinagkaiba? Sa attempted, hindi mo natapos yung ginagawa mo. Sa frustrated, ginawa mo na lahat, anong nangyari? Bigo ka pa din. Parang sa love lang. Okay? Attempted, for example, nanligaw ka. Nanligaw ka, ganyan. So, kaso lang, hindi mo pa nabibigay or na-show yung love mo sa kanya, nahadlangan ka na ng parents niya. That is attempted. Okay. Paano frustrated? Minahal mo na, binigay mo na lahat-lahat, kaso hindi ka pa rin niya ginusto or minahal. That is frustrated. Yung wala namang hubad lang sa'yo, binigay mo na lahat, ginawa mo na lahat, pero hindi ka pa rin niya na love back. So, that is frustrated. How about consummated? Kapag kasi ganyan, nakaka-relate kayo eh. Hindi kayo makarelate dun sa langgam namin ni Lawrence eh. Okay? Paano ang consummated? Paano ang consummated? consummated when all the elements necessary for its execution and accomplishment are present. Masasabi natin consummated kapag lahat ng acts ginawa mo. For example, ginawa mo na lahat. Tapos ang nangyari, nagbunga. Boom, nilove ka din niya. That is consummated. Ibig sabihin, perfect crime. That is the meaning of consummated. You already executed all the acts and it resulted into a crime. Naiintindihan po ba niyan? Ang pinagkaiba ng attempted, frustrated, and consummated. Naiintindihan po?
Yes po, ma'am. Yes po.
Example, kanwari, magnanakaw ka sana. Nabukas mo na yung bag niya. Ayan, napasok mo na yung kamay mo. Ang problema, wala pala yung wallet doon. That is attempted. Frustrated naman, nabuksan mo na yung bag niya, nakuha mo na yung wallet niya. Ang problema, nandun siya, nahuli ka. Hindi mo nanakaw. That is frustrated. Paano yung consummated? Nakuha mo na yung wallet niya, napasok mo yung kamay mo, nakuha mo yung wallet niya, umalis ka, nanakaw yung pera niya. That is consummated. Perfect crime. Nakuha mo, nagawa mo. Naintindihan na niyan? Ang pinagkaiba ng
Yes
attempted,
po.
frustrated, and consummated. That's how simply it is. Madalas, hindi mo na siya makita yung word na consummated kasi imbis na sabihin pa nilang consummated, tatawagin na lang nila na crime mismo. Murder. Kaya na lang. O, kaya meron tayong attempted murder, frustrated murder, meron tayong murder na lang. Hindi nila ginagamit yung word na consummated. Kasi, consummated, it means this is the crime already. Naiintindihan po ba niyan? Ha? Sabihin niyo,
Yes, ma'am.
ano to, batas to ha. Mahirap kaya hindi ko siya yung parang ayoko magpa-quiz agad ng wala tong discussion na to eh. Kasi malilito kayo. Lalo na sa finals. Okay? Kasi batas. Kapag batas, didi-discuss muna talaga. Unless mga gusto nyong mag-abogado, yung kayo na mismo yung iintindi. Okay, according to the classification of felonies naman, diba? So, according to the manner or mode of execution, meron tayong intentional and culpable. Again, kapag nga intentional, ito tatawag nating deceit or dolo. Ibig sabihin, sinasadya. Ito yung mga murder, estafa, yan. Pag sinabi nating intentional felonies, these are premeditated. Pag sinabing premeditated, pinaghandaan. Ganyan. Culpable felonies naman, these are what we call fault or tinatawag nating kulpa yung kanina. So, it means where the wrongful acts resulted from the imprudence, negligence, yan. Imprudence, kulang ka sa alam. Okay? Negligence, pinabayaan mo. Lack of foresight, hindi mo nakita. Lack of skill, hindi mo kayang gawin. Example, homicide through reckless imprudence of driving to. Okay? Driving yun. So, according to the gravity of Article 9, pwede naman grave, less grave, and light felonies. So, meron tayong tinatawag na light, less grave, and grave. Kapag light, these are just only infractions of the law, which the penalty of arrestment or and fine not exceeding 200. Pero ngayon yata napalitan na to, yung light felonies, 4,000 na siya. And then, less grave felonies, those in which the penalties in their maximum period are correctional. And the grave felonies are those attaches with the capital punishment. Pag sinabi natin capital punishment, ito na yung papaabot ka sa death penalty, life imprisonment, yan. Or any penalty which is afflictive in any of its period. Light, less grave, and grave. Yan. Who incurs criminal liability? Sino ba yung mga nagiging criminal? Do you have any questions so far? Just raise your hand, okay? Or parang gamitin yung comment box kung hindi. Or just tell me to interrupt. Ma'am, excuse po. Kasi law ito. Again, who incurs criminal liability? Criminal liability shall be incurred. One paragraph, ito. By any person committing a felony or delito, although the wrongful act done be different from that which he intended. Or yung tinatawag nating impossible crime. Meron po tayong impossible crime, ha? For example, okay? Next, by any person performing an act which would be an offense against person or property, were it not for the inherent impossibility of its accomplishment or on account of the employment of inadequate or ineffectual means. Explain natin itong first paragraph first. Itong, by any person committing a felony, although the wrongful act done be different from that which he intended. For example, iba naman, wag naman si Lawrence. Ah, si sino ba? O kanwari, ito naman si Patricia G. Si Patricia G at saka si Queen Berly Pineda. Okay, mag-best friend tong mga to. Kanwari, mag-best friend si Patricia G at saka si Queen Berly Pineda. Ngayon, nalaman niya na nalaman ni Patricia G na si Queen Berly Pineda pala inagaw yung boyfriend niya ng patago. So, ang ginawa niya, niyaya niya kumain itong si Queen Berly Pineda. Ang nangyari, okay, pinainom niya ng parang poison. Habang kumakain sila, nilagyan niya ng poison itong si Queen Berly Pineda. After 10 minutes, okay, namatay si Queen Berly Pineda. So, akala ni Patricia G siya yung, cause of the death, or parang siya yung dahilan, di ba, kung bakit namatay si Queen Berly Pineda. Nung lumabas na yung parang autopsy report, napag-alaman ang cause of death ni Queen Berly Pineda is hindi naman poison, through heart attack. Okay. Ang tanong, ma'am, sasampahan po ba ng kaso si Patricia G?
Hindi po.
Hindi, okay. Pero, pwede siyang sampahan ng kaso ng mga impossible crime. Ito, tingnan nyo ha. Who incurs criminal liability? Paragraph 1. Ayan. El que es cosa de la cosa es cosa del mal casado. Okay? Maraming ganyan sa mga revised penal code. He who is the cause of the cause is the cause of the evil cause. Ayan. El que es cosa del mal casado. He who is the cause of the cause is the cause of the evil cause. Article 4 may refer to either error in persona, aberratio ictus, and praeter intentionem. Okay, for example, error in persona, it means mistake in identity of the victim. For example, ayan, lalasunin niya sana si Queen Berly Pineda. Kaso, ang dumating pala sa bahay niya is yung kabal ni Queen Berly Pineda. Ang tanong, pwede po bang nasampahan ng kaso si Patricia G?
Opo.
Yes, kasi kahit na ang intention niya ay ang lasunin niya si Queen Berly Pineda, still ang lumabas naman tawag dito, pumatay siya ng ibang tao, still. Okay? Siya pa din ang may kasalanan. Ang tawag doon, error in persona, nagkamali siya. Next naman, aberratio ictus, mistaken blow. O for example, niyaya niya ulit si Queen Berly Pineda, tapos kasama naman yung kapatid niya, Ralph Jones Yuto. Binigyan niya ng parehong inumin. Kaso, yung napuntang lason pala, imbis na kay Queen Berly, napunta kay Ralph Jones. Tanong, namatay si Ralph Jones. Sino may kasalanan? Pwede pang
Si
sampahan
Ralph
ng kaso
Jones.
si Patricia G?
Opo.
Kahit na ang gusto niyang patayin si Queen Berly?
Opo.
Ang tawag doon, ang tinawag na aberratio ictus or mistaken blow. Nagkamali siya ng target. Okay? Ano pinagkaiba ng error in persona sa aberratio ictus? Sa error in persona, hindi mo alam na hindi pala siya yun. Okay? Mistake in identity. Kapag naman aberratio ictus, alam mong nandun siya. Problema, okay, napunta lang sa iba yung, parang sa baril. Parang babaril ka. Balitan natin, wag lason. Sa malayuan, babarilin ni Patricia G si Queen Berly. Okay? Nung nakita niyo yung tao, akala niya, si Queen Berly. Babarilin niyang ganyan. Ang nangyari, hindi pala si Queen Berly. Kamukha lang ni Queen Berly. That is error in persona. Mistaken in identity. Ang aberratio ictus naman ganito. Sure siya na si Queen Berly yun. Confirm. Ang problema, katabi niya si Ralph Jones Yuto. Nung babarilin na niya si Queen Berly Pineda, biglang umalis si Queen Berly Pineda, ang natamaan tuloy si Ralph Jones Yuto. So, therefore, yun ang tinatawag nating aberratio ictus or mistaken blow. And the last one is praeter intentionem. Ito naman, the result done is greater than that originally intended. For example, ang balak lang talaga niya is itulak si Queen Berly Pineda at madapa. Pero ang nangyari is, ang nangyari kay Queen Berly, katulak niya, bangin pala yung nasa likod. So, namatay si Queen Berly. Bakit ay pinagkaiba? Ang preterintention yan, parang lumalala dun sa intention niya. Ang intention lang niya is magasgas yung muka or magasgas yung legs ni Queen Birdie. Pero ang nangyari, nung tunulak niya, imbis na magasgas lang, ang nangyari, napatay niya. So again, kahit na, di ba sabi nga natin, intentional felony, kahit na yung cause niya is parang kakaiba from what he or she intended, still magiging liable ka. Kasi nag-commit ka ng isang crime. Kahit hindi ganun ang intention mo, kung yun naman ang naging result niya ay crime pa din, still you are liable. Naiintindihan po ba? That is Article 4. Iba po pala yung sa impossible crime. Sa last part pala yan. Naiintindihan? Hi.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Bibigyan ko kasi kayo ng ano yan, sa finals ng tawag dito, application ng mga ganyan. For example, lahat kayo nadapa. Okay? Yung sinasabi ng he is the cause of the cause is the cause of evil cause. For example, magkakatabi. Ayan. Diana, Ellis, Ella, and James. Tinulak lang ni Jenna Jane si James Patrick. Tapos, dahil tinulak niya si James Patrick, napatid niya si Ella napatid niya si Ellis naman napatid niya si Diana Eileen. Si Diana Eileen namatay dahil napatid siya. Tanong, sino may kasalanan? Sino may kasalanan nun?
Yung una.
Yung nagtulak.
Yung nagtulak, di ba? Hindi si Elise. Yun. El cosa es cosa de la cosa es cosa del malcasado. Kahit ang gusto lang naman ni Jenna Jane is itulak lang tong si James Patrick. Pero dahil dun sa ginawa niya, nagkasunod-sunod yung crime na nangyari. Therefore, still, yung unang nagtulak pa din ang merong kaso. Sabi nga niya, kahit it is different from what he or she intended or your intention, still, if it resulted to a crime, therefore, it is also a crime. Liable pa rin siya. Criminal liability. Liable ka sa kanya. Okay na tayo dito sa paragraph 4 or article 4, paragraph 1. Naintindihan na niyan? Pinagkaiba? Walang kayong tanong or so whatever? Hello?
Wala po, ma'am.
Okay. Next. Tayo ha. Ito. We have proximate cause kasi and requisites of Article 4, Paragraph 1. An intentional felony has been committed. Yun nga, intentional. The wrong done to the victim be direct, natural, and logical, consequent to the felony committed by the offender. The felony done must be the proximate cause resulting to injury. So, we have proximate cause and efficient intervening cause. Pag sinabi natin proximate cause, ito yung pinakadahilan or pinaka-cause. Yan. It is the cause which in ordinary and continuous sequence unbroken by any efficient intervening cause produces the injury. Ano naman yung tinatawag nating efficient intervening cause? Ito naman yung humahad lang. Okay? Are those that break the relation of cause and effect. So the felony committed is not the proximate cause of the resulting injury when there is an active force that intervened between the felony committed and resulting injury. And the last one, the resulting injury is due to the intentional and act of the accused. Yan. For example, sa kaso, kanwari, katulad ng example ko kanina, ang gusto talaga ni Jenna Jane Tamayo is itulak itong si James Patrick. So, natulak niya. Dahil natulak niya si James Patrick, okay, ang nangyari, napatid niya si Ella napatid si Ella is natulak tuloy si Diana Eileen. Ang tanong, okay, sinasampahan ng kaso sa Ella is pwede ba? Papasok na yung tinatawag nating efficient intervening cause. Bakit? Hindi naman niya yung gusto, di ba? Ibig sabihin, natulak lang naman talaga siya eh. Yun. Ibig sabihin, sabi niya, the resulting injury is due to the intentional and act of the accused, yung iba. And there is an active force that intervened between the felony and the resulting injury. Ang proximate cause naman, ito yung pinakadahilan. Next, we have impossible crimes. Ayan, ito yung sinasabi ko sa inyo. What is impossible crimes? Those crimes which have been committed against person or property were it not for the inherent impossibility of the accomplishment or on account of the employment of inadequate or ineffectual means. The purpose of the law in punishing impossible crime is to suppress the criminal propensities or tendencies. What are the requisites of a possible crime? Ito. That the act performed would have been an offense against the persons or property. For example, balik tayo dun sa poison. Patricia G. and Queen Berlie. Si Patricia G, ang gagawin niya, lalasunin niya si Queen Berlie. So, therefore, intentional, di ba? The act performed would be an offense against person or property. Next, the act was done with evil intent. Bakit nga niya, lalasunin si Queen Berlie? Kasi, inagaw sa kanya yung boyfriend niya. Yan. So, talagang pinagplanuhan niya with intention. Ngayon, ang nangyari kasi, its accomplishment is inherently impossible because it the means either inadequate or ineffectual. Ibig sabihin, hindi effective yung nagawa niya. Katulad ng sinabi ko sa inyo kanina, binigyan niya ng lason si Queen Berlie Pineda, tapos namatay. Kaso nung lumabas ang autopsy report, hindi naman pala pagkalason ang pinamatay ni Queen Berlie Pineda. Okay. Next, that the act does not constitute another violation of the RPC. Or parang wala siyang ibang kaso. Bigyan ko kayo ng another example. Lason ulit. Sige. Sabihin na natin si Patricia G ay bibigyan niya ulit ng lason si Queen Berlie Pineda. Ngayon, sa pagkakataong ito, hindi mamamatay si Queen Berlie Pineda. Kasi, yung palang lason na binigay ni Patricia G is expired na. Therefore, wala nang epekto. Hindi na siya mamamatay. Ang tanong, di ba, ano ba ang intensyon ni Patricia G? Patayin at lasunin si Queen Berlie. Pwede mo sapan ng kaso si Patricia G?
Yes, ma'am.
Anong kaso? Anong kaso niya nun?
Attempted murder.
Attempted.
Walang nangyari kay Queen Berlie. As in, talagang buhay na buhay siya. Paano mo masabing attempted murder? Kailangan may injury siyang naganap. Wala mang injury naganap kay Queen Berlie. As in, buhay na
Frustrated.
buhay. Frustrated. Wala nga. Di ba ang definition ng murder, act of killing a person, tapos meron siyang injury or what? Frustrated ba?
Tempted.
Alam nyo ano ang crime na isasampan mo kaso sa kanya nun? Impossible crime. Hindi siya pwedeng maging murder. Hindi po pwedeng maging murder yon. Okay? Naintindihan po ba? Hindi siya pwedeng maging murder. So, ang tawag doon ay impossible crime. So, kasi ang nangyari, its accomplishment is inherently impossible because the means used is either inadequate or ineffectual. Kasi yung ginamit niyang lason, expired pala. Yung ginamit niyang lason, hindi sapat. Pwede kasing maging attempted dyan if itong si Queen Berlie Pineda is parang sumakit yung tiyan niya, ganyan, nag-convulsion siya, ganyan. Diba? Or parang naamoy pa lang yung mismong poison. Kanwari, attempted, kung kanwari, hindi pa naaamoy or hindi pa naiinom ni Queen Berlie tapos natuklasan niya na merong poison yung inumin niya. That is attempted murder. Pwede. Kung namang frustrated, yung kainom niya, ang nangyari, sumakit yung tiyan niya, na tawag dito, na-hospital siya, pero nabuhay pa siya. So, that is frustrated. Pero ang nangyari nga kasi, as in wala. Wala siyang naramdaman ni ano. So, ang tawag doon ay impossible crime. So, ang another requisite ng impossible crime kasi, sabi niya, the act does not constitute another violation of the RPC. Wala siyang kamukhang violation under the revised penal code. Kaya tinatanong ko kayo kanina ano ang isasampa mong kaso kay Patricia? That is
Impossible.
Impossible crime.
Kaya kung tinatanong kayo, is there an act, okay, or is there a punishment about, or is there an impossible crime? The answer is yes. Okay. So next, we have the circumstances. Okay po. Konti na lang. 3 slide. 4 na slide. Ayan. Circumstances affecting criminal liability. We have tinatawag na GMAA. binigyan ko lang ng abbreviation or parang acronym. Justifying, exempting, mitigating, aggravating, alternative. Okay. Justifying, exempting, mitigating, aggravating, and alternative. Pag sinabi natin justifying, okay, those wherein the acts of the actor are accordance with the law, hence he incurs no criminal liability. Pag sinabi natin justifying ang circumstances ng isang criminal liability, therefore, wala siyang kaso. No criminal liability, no civil liability. For example, meron tayong hostage situation. Ngayon, ang sinabi ng head ng police is shoot to kill. Shoot to kill muna yung hostage taker. Ngayon, binaril niya, syempre, nung ating mga shooter. Ganyan, ng ating mga SWAT. Ang tanong, pwede mong ipakulong yung SWAT? Pwede mong ipakulong yung SWAT?
Di po.
Hindi. Bakit? Kasi yung ginawa niya is accordance with the law, and therefore he incurs no criminal liability and civil liability. Kasi sinunod lang naman niya kung ano ang pinapautos ng batas sa kanya or ano ang inuutos sa kanya. That is justifying. Naintindihan po. In accordance with the law. Parang kung sisirain mo yung bahay nila, okay, hindi ka pwedeng sampahan ng kaso ng destruction of ganyan-ganyan property. Kasi sinunod mo lang naman ang batas. Basta kapag ang ginawa nila is sinunod ang batas, therefore, lahat ng pwedeng ipasa ng kaso kanya hindi pwede. Justifying yun. Next, exempting naman. What's the difference between ano naman ang pinagkaiba ng justifying sa exempting? Exempting, those were in the absence in the agent of the crime any of all conditions that would make an act voluntary, and hence also there is no criminal liability but there is a civil liability. Ang exempting naman, without accordance with the law. Voluntary act to. Walang nagsabi sa'yo, hindi mo to walang batas na nagsabing gawin mo to. Pero, okay, or parang wala kang authority or hindi mo naman yun parang trabaho para gawin. Yan. Kaya ako sinabing hindi siya with accordance with the law. Kapag exempting siya, ibig sabihin, wala kang criminal liability pero meron kang civil liability. For example, hindi ka makukulong pero magbabayad ka ng ganito dahil sa ginawa mo. So, that is exempting. Wala kang criminal liability, wala kang civil liability. Ang pinagkaiba niya kay justifying, sa justifying both, wala siyang criminal liability and civil liability. Pagdating kay exempting, wala kang criminal liability, pero meron kang civil liability. And that is the fines, yung pagbabayad mo. Next naman, mitigating circumstances, okay? To the effect of reducing the penalty. For example, from death penalty, magiging 20 years na lang. That is mitigating circumstances. For example, sinampan siya ng kaso na murder, tapos ang penalty niya is life imprisonment. Ngayon, kaya pala niya napatay, kasi galit na galit siya, gato ganyan. Parang merong factor na nagpapamitigate, or parang nakita nila na merong cause kung bakit mapapatay yung isang tao. That is mitigating circumstances. Pinapababa yung penalty. Mitigate nga. Next naman is aggravating circumstances, wherein kabaliktaran naman ito ng mitigating. If there are acts na magpapababa ng kaso mo, meron din naman mga acts na ginawa mo na lalong dagdag ng kaso mo. For example, nagbebenta ka ng drugs. Tapos sa pagbebenta mo ng drugs, gumamit ka pa ng minor. Therefore, or nag-aggravate pa yung penalty mo. Bakit? Kasi kung nagbebenta ka ng drugs, ang penalty mo lang, sabihin mo ng 500 to 10 million. Ganyan. Ngayon, dahil nalaman nila na gumamit ka ng bata, okay? Gumamit ka ng bata, therefore, imbis na ang kulong mo is 20 years, ganyan, or 10 million lang yung fine, mas dadagdag pa nun. Ibig sabihin, mas lalong pinapataas, nag-a-aggravate. Next naman, the last one is alternative. Ito naman, naglalaro sa dalawa. It is either way aggravating or mitigating according to the nature and effects of the crime and other conditions attending its commission. So again, those are the 5 circumstances affecting the criminal liability, or paano ka, kapag sinasampahan ka ng kaso, or kapag naglilitis, dyan po lumalabas yung tsemaan na yan. Justifying, exempting, mitigating, aggravating, and alternative. Kaya nga po, paiba-iba yung kaso ng mga tao Diba? For example, okay, pag nag-commit ka ng murder, ang penalty mo is 20 years to 40 years. Pero bakit merong mga 30 years lang na lumalaya na? Kasi nga, depende po doon sa acts of execution or paano nila ginawa yung isang crime. Kasi there are acts wherein it will be included to justifying, sometimes exempting, sometimes i-mitigate, bababa. Yung iba naman, lalong tataas. And the last one is alternative. It's either aggravating or mitigating. Next, eto na. Konti na lang. Who are principals, accomplices, and accessories? Diba naririnig nyo yan? Karmare, gumawa kayo ng crime, tapos tatlo kayo. Bigyan nyo, tatlo. Ayan, for example, si Michael Joseph. Ayan, kasama niya si Nicole Ivy Santos. So, we have principal, accomplice, and accessories. So, we have Michael Joseph, Nicole Ivy Santos, and Oliver John Manalo. Silang tatlo, magnanakaw sila. Paano mo sabi na yung isa ay principal? Paano mo sabi yung isa ay accomplice? At paano mo masabi na ang isa ay just accessory? Ganito. The following are considered principals if they are the one who take direct part in the execution of act. If silang tatlo, okay, pinagplanuhan nila na magnanakaw sila, okay, silang tatlo, tapos sila din yung nagnakaw, therefore, principal sila. Okay. Those who directly force or endorse others to commit. For example, si Michael Joseph, inutusan lang niya si Nicole Ivy Santos na magnakaw. Itong si Nicole Ivy Santos, nagnakaw nga. Ang tanong, sino ang principal? Principal ba nun si Michael Joseph? Yung mga mastermind, yung mga nag-utos, principal pa din yun. Kahit hindi sila mismo yung nag-act, okay, pinagawa lang nila sa iba, still, they are considered as principal. Those who cooperate in the commission of the offense by another act without which it would not have been accomplished. For example, si Michael Joseph, ayan, pinagplanuhan nga niya na, kalmari, iba na naman, magnakaw sa BDO, Bank of BDO. Ngayon, inutusan niya si Nicole Ivy Santos. Ayan, so siya yung magnanakaw, si Nicole Ivy Santos. Ngayon, syempre, hindi makakapasok itong si Nicole Ivy Santos dahil mahigpit ang security ng BDO. Ngayon, nangyari, manager si Oliver John Manalo sa BDO. Ang nangyari, binuksan niya yung mismong BDO account, din ganyan. So, nanakaw ni Nicole Ivy Santos yung pera sa BDO. Ang tanong, accessories ba, accomplice ba itong si Oliver John Manalo? Hindi. Still, magiging principal siya. Bakit? Kahit hindi siya yung nagnakaw, kahit binigyan niya lang yung access. Kasi kung hindi naman ibibigay ni Oliver John Manalo yung access kay Michael Joseph and kay Nicole Ivy, hindi sila makakapag-nakaw. So, ganun ang principal. Is either ikaw yung nag-uutos, ikaw yung gumagawa, or kung di dahil sa'yo, hindi magagawa ang crime, still, you are principal. Principal actor. Next, meron naman tayong accomplice. Ano naman yung mga accomplice? Accomplices are those person who not being included as principals cooperate in the execution of the offense by the previous or simultaneous act. For example, si Nicole Ivy Santos. Ayan. Hindi naman siya originally part of the plan. Pero, bigla na lang niyang nakita si Luigi Castro na may sasakyan. Ayan. Hatid mo muna ako sa ganito. Tapos sabi niya, bakit anong gagawin mo doon? Sabi niya kay Nicole Ivy Santos, basta hatid mo lang naman ako doon. Hatid mo lang ako. Tapos pakitignan yung gate kung meron taong dumadaan. Yan. Magiging accomplice lang siya noon. Bakit? Hindi naman siya yung nagnakaw eh. Pangalawa, nag-drive lang naman siya. Saka hindi siya yung part ng original plan, di ba? Na hindi naman siya yung inutusan, hindi niya alam yung parang nalaman naman niya na ano bang gagawin mo doon, Nicole, sabi ni Luigi. Nanakawin ko yung perang ganito. Eh dahil pumayag itong si Luigi Castro kahit hindi siya part ng original plan, still you are considered as accomplice. Accomplice are those persons who not being included as principals cooperate, nakipag-cooperate sila in the execution of the offense by previous or simultaneous act. And the last one is accessories. Para naman nating masabi na accessory yung isang tao. Accessories are those who having knowledge of the commission of the crime and without having participated therein, either as principals or accomplices, take part subsequent to its commission in any of the following manner. Ito, nag-profit siya. Yan. By profiting themselves, assisting the offender to profit the effects of the crime. Ayan. Kanwari, Sana yung mga in-example ko, nagsilip na yata. O, kanara si Nicole Ivy, ayan. Binigay niya yung pera sa magulang niya. Tinanong siya ng magulang niya, saan mo galing to? Hinakaw ko. O gusto naman ng mga magulang niya na ninakaw siya. Still, magiging accessory yan. Next, by concealing or destroying the body of the crime or the effects of instruments thereof. For example, o nanakaw ko na yung ganito, linisin mo na lang yung mismong account ha, pinalinis mong ganyan. Still, kahit ikaw yung nagnakaw, nilinis mo yung mga evidences, nilinis mo lahat, you are accessory. So, by harboring, concealing, or assisting the escape of principal, ayan, of the crime provided that the accessory acts of his public function or whenever the author of the crime guilty of treason, parricide yan, is known to be habitually guilty of some other crime. So, ganun ang principals, ang pinagkaiba ng principals, accomplices, and accessories. Principals, ikaw mismo ang gumawa, ikaw ang nag-utos, or kung di dahil sa'yo, hindi mangyayari ang crime. Accomplices naman, ito yung mga nakipag-cooperate lang ng biglaan. Ayan. Hindi ikaw yung gagawa ng crime. Okay? Nakipag-cooperate ka lang. Ang accessories, ito yung hinayaan mo. Hindi ka nag-take part. Hindi, parang magte-take part ka pa lang sa crime na ginawa nila after nilang nagawa yun. Papasok ka pa lang after. Katulad nga na sinabi ko sa inyo, nandiyan na yung nakaw na pera. Diba? Binigay niya yung pera kay parents niya. Ibig sabihin, nag-profit. Another one naman is, nakapagnakaw na sila. Ang gagawin mo na lang is lilinisin yung pinagnakawan nila. So, accessories yun. Nakita niyo na po, naiintindihan po ba ang pinagkaiba ng principal, accomplices, and accessories?
Yes, ma'am.
Opo.
Yes po.
Example. Give you example, ha? Ana. Sige. Si Ana, okay, galit siya kay Bella. Okay? Ngayon, si Ana, inutusan niya si Jose na patayin si Bella. Ang tanong. Okay. Si Ana, ulit. Ana, Jose, and Bella. Si Ana galit kay Bella. Okay? Ang ginawa ni Ana, inutusan niya sino? Si Jose na barilin si Bella. Ayan. So, habang papunta si Jose doon sa bahay ni Bella, okay, nakita niya si Wally. Okay. Wally, pairam ako ng baril mo. Sabi niya ganyan. Aanhin mo, sabi ni Wally. Nasira kasi yung yung baril ko. Sabi niya gano'n, nasira yung baril ko. Ano ba gagawin mo sa baril? Papatayin ko si Bella. Okay, hiniram niya. Yung pinahiram naman ni Wally yung alin?
Barel.
Baril. Yun. So, habang nagdadrive itong si Jose, okay, nakapunta na niya sa bahay ni Bella. Nung babarilin niya sa Bella, bigla namang umalis itong si Bella. Nakasakyan, mabilis na sasakyan. Okay. Habang nagdadrive itong si Jose, biglang nalaglag yung baril na pinahiram ni Wally. Makikita niya si Paulo. Okay, makikita niya si Paulo. Nung nakita niya si Paulo, nung malapit na siya kay Bella, pairam ng baril mo, sabi niya ganyan. Aanhin mo, sabi ni Paulo, papatayin ko si Bella. Binigay naman ni Paulo kay Jose. So, kapag ni Jose, yun. Gamit ang baril ni Paulo, napatay niya si Bella. Naintindihan ng kwento? Meron tayong 5 tao. Si Ana, nagalit kay Bella. Si Jose, na inutusan ni Bella. Si Wally, na nanghiram una ng baril. At si Paulo, na hiniraman ng baril. Tapos yun talaga ang ginamit. Kasi yung hiniram kay Wally, nasira. Ang tanong, si Ana ay alin?
Principal.
Principal.
Accomplice or accessories?
Principal.
Principal.
He induced, diba? How about si Jose?
Principal.
Principal.
Kasi siya yung gumawa. How
Yes.
about si Wally?
Accomplice.
Accessory.
Accessories.
Accessory.
Accomplice.
Accomplice.
lang. Okay? Bakit? Kasi alam niya tumulong naman siya, binigyan niya baril. Si Paulo.
Accomplice.
Accomplice.
Accessories.
Principal.
Principal.
Bakit principal? Kasi
Galing
wala
sa atin
yung
yung baril.
baril. Kung wala yung baril ni Paulo, hindi niya mababaril sino? Or hindi niya mapapatay si
Bella.
Bella. Ano bang sabi ng principal? Those who cooperate in the commission of the offense by another act, without that, it would not have been accomplished. Gets nyo na yan? Di ba kung wala
Yeah,
yung
yeah.
baril ni Paulo, hindi niya mapapatay sino? Si Bella. Dagdagan natin. Ginagawa na ni Jose yung crime niya. Nung nagawa na ni Jose yung crime niya, nakita niya si Main, si Yaya Dab. Pakilinis nga yung sasakyan. Sabi niya ganyan. Tapos, basta linisin mo at ako nang bahala dito sa katawan ni Bella. Linisin yung sasakyan. So, nagbukang bago yung sasakyan. Walang dugo, ganyan. Ano si Main?
Accessories.
Accessories.
Bakit? Kasi si Main, hindi naman siya yung talagang sumali habang ginagawa yung crime eh. Dumating na lang siya after nang nangyari ang crime. Naintindihan nyo na nun ang pinagkaiba ng principal, accomplice, and accessories? Ganun lang siya kadali. Ha? Again, accomplice, nakikipag-cooperate lang yan. Okay? Pero hindi ganun kahalaga yung ginawa niya. Ano pinagkaiba lang ng accomplice kay accessories? Pareho lang silang nakikipag-cooperate. Ang problema, okay, si accomplice, nakipag-cooperate siya habang ginagawa ang crime. Si accessories, nakipag-cooperate siya kapag natapos ng ginawa ang crime. Okay na tayo niyan. So kapag nakita nyo or nabasa nyo anong pinagkaiba ng principal, accomplice, and accessories, ganun lang po siya kadali. Gamitin nyo yung example ko, magkwento kayo ng ganun. Okay? Next, the last one. Ito, points to remember, last slide na lang to. Nulum krimen, nulum pine sinalege, it means there is no crime when there is no law punishing it. Mga principles lang to. A person to be guilty of crime must commit that crime himself, or he must, in some manner, participate in its commission or in fruits thereof. So, only natural persons are criminally liable. So, juridical persons are not criminally liable, but the president or other officers of the corporation may be criminally liable in those instances they have been knowingly permitted or committed crimes such as estafa and falsification. So, kapag sinabi natin juridical persons, these are corporations. Okay? These are the group of persons. Especially ang nasasampahan lang ng kaso dito, yung pinaka-president or yung mga pasimuno ng mga ganyan. So, there are no accessories in light penalties. Diba meron tayong as to grave of its the crime, pwedeng grave, light, less grave, and then grave. Kapag ang kaso niya is just only a light offense or light penalties, therefore wala pong accessories yan. And the last one, jura led sed lex. Jura led sed lex means the law may be harsh, but it is the law. Wala kang magagawa kahit sabihin mo ng masyadong harsh ang batas. Wala kang magagawa kung hindi sundin lang yan. Jura led sed lex. And the meaning of another Latin word, nulum crimen, nulum pine, sinalega, there is no crime and there is no law punishing it. So, as simple as that. So, we finished already the course unit 13 and course unit 14. So, do you have any questions? So far?
Wala po.
Wala po.
Wala po.
So, if you don't have any questions, then I will just stop this recording.